Hey, all right. It is already another Thursday, 1st July. Already. I wouldn't lie, this week has gone by pretty fast. Hey, hello everyone. Welcome back to another stream. I got a light. Hang on. Oh, I got a light. Hope you can hear me. Just haul out in chat. And as usual, we can get started on the bouncing ball. So let me know if you can hear me. Audio is okay. And if you can see my face. Yes. Let's see if this helps. It's like an energy saver thing. Oh, that's a bit better. Sawa, hello. Here I am. Hopefully you can see me as well. I should close this. All right, if it all checks out. Hello and welcome once again to another stream. New graphics, new stuff going on the page. Let me know what you think. But also the presentation is gonna be a little bit more different. Gonna try and mix in some of the practical stuff with the theory so that hopefully things aren't too dense at the beginning and then mellowing out, we become too tired for the practical stuff. So hopefully if I can mix it in and keep things clear, we should be able to absorb everything. So as usual, I'd like your feedback in the group or in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. But generally speaking, we are here to talk about the bouncing ball. Is this dimming out? I think it is. I'm not sure how helpful that is. Okay, yeah, that is a difference. A small difference, though. Okay, so if you guys, anyone have any questions? Don't take too long before get started. It's definitely dimmer now. Okay, I guess we'll leave it as a security light for now. No, it's not too bad. Okay. So chat is delayed. So let me switch on over to my screen. Wrong one. Here we are. Hello, Jeffrey. Welcome. Hi, Jotham. Hope you guys are good. Ooh, I have one of these too. I'm gonna be trying to switch between these and should work nicely. All right, so today's video we're talking about today's stream we're talking about the bouncing ball and how it applies to animation and why all animators have to start with the bouncing ball. The objective here is that you should be able to understand why animators are doing it and also be able to do it in different ways. Somehow in the process of doing this presentation, I ended up doing a bouncing ball in PowerPoint itself, in slides. So that was pretty interesting. But we'll get to that. So if you've done 2D, 3D, motion graphics, any of those, all this stuff is going to apply, even stop motion if you're or claymation if you're feeling adventurous. All this stuff is going to apply because what we're looking at is the bouncing ball itself, the ball itself, and what it's doing and how it applies to animation as an art form. Then another thing I was meant to add about bouncing ball, I'll probably add as we go along. But yeah. Yes, this also applies to... Oh, yeah, I have a slide for that. Okay, so I guess you guys can hear me and can see me clearly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and continue. So welcome back. I'm glad to see we have the same crew from the last stream. So we can just keep going with the info that I was giving you guys last time. And also, if you have any extra questions from last time, feel free to throw them in at any point. Ooh, I forgot to start Epic Pen. I need this today. I'm going to be drawing quite a bit on the screen. Just give it a sec to start. It's a really nice app. I've used it before actually in a previous Hangout a while back. Yes, I have space to throw my hands. Let's see, where's the UI gone? There we go. So I'll just park this guy up here. So the bouncing ball, let's get started. As I mentioned, we previously talked about how we are working with a computer. It's not really just us alone, or rather, now that we're working in the future, we're working computers. So our workflow has changed quite a bit. That's what we were talking about last time. We're still going to touch on that. And one of the main things we're going to pick from it is that since this presentation is kind of like to general styles of animation, we can say that when we're creating keyframes or when we're creating moments, we're actually creating frames. As you recall, before I said frames is like that one moment in time, how it looks, where everything is. That's what that's what a frame is, not a keyframe or an in-between or anything. It's just a frame alone. So when I say we're creating frames, we're basically just either adding a keyframe in a 3D software, taking a photo in stop motion, and so on. So yeah, just remember that kind of thing. Yeah, so we also talked about how it can be stressful working with a computer because it can't really understand what you're telling it, and we have to use very technical methods just to be able to get out of a computer what we need from a human. But at the same time, it also comes with a lot of useful tools, a lot of shortcuts, which are also useful. And if we can reframe our way of thinking, then it becomes a lot easier to make use of all those different tools we have. So why are we animating a bouncing ball? Why does it matter so much? It's mainly because it's the simplest setup that will involve gravity and such, and it helps us learn about timing and spacing. And just to test out if this guy is working as planned, let's see. Timing and spacing would be, we're thinking about a bouncing ball like this. The timing would be the moment when the ball hits the ground, when it gets into the air. Those are really important. And the spacing is how closely together we're going to put the frames when the ball is in different places. We're really going to go into detail a bit later, but that's generally what we're thinking. If anyone's going to ask you what the bouncing ball is about, it's timing and spacing. Watch basically any YouTube video or tutorial that talks about the bouncing ball is going to mention this. And once you have a good understanding of timing and spacing early, especially in a simple enough setup like in a bouncing ball, it becomes a lot easier to now start applying it again to more complex rigs, to characters, to creatures, dragons, cars that are talking. You can now apply it to anything once you've understood how it works with a ball. So there's a lot of complicated stuff going on. It's actually really hard to do. It's kind of hard to do. But once you've understood what's going on and once you've really gotten a hang of what it means when you're doing a bouncing ball, it becomes, easier to animate everything else. Because it has some of these terms that we use in animation and probably stuff you've heard from the 12 principles of animation. Things like ease in, slow in, and slow out. We have squash and stretch. All these concepts are explored while you're doing the bouncing ball. But generally speaking, it also helps to learn about momentum and gravity, just how momentum affects different objects, or actually how momentum affects the ball, what it means when the ball actually hits the ground and how it reflects off the ground. All that stuff, it seems minor, but it all adds up to something. So all these are also stuff we'll just generally talk about in the whole thing. So I don't think I need to go. I don't think I need to go through them one by one right now. So let's talk about animating a bouncing ball and the steps you're going to take. The first is you need to do your planning and reference, and then you need to do your scene setup, do your blocking, refine your blocking, and then you can do your final animation or polish. In this case, it's just a bouncing ball, so we're just going to do a few steps, 5 steps. Sometimes there's extra stuff in between. There's like blocking plus and such, but don't worry about that. So the bouncing ball comes in a few setups. There's the just standard bouncing ball, which is a ball bouncing in place. It's a loop. It bounces in the same height. And the goal here is to make a successful loop. And also just make it look right. Make it hover in the air just the right amount. Make it come down the right speed, accelerate at what looks right, and so on. And the squash as well. It's also a good platform to now start doing the squash and stretch by itself and focus on that, because it's just up and down as opposed to all these other things that happen in other setups like heavy versus light, where you do a bowling ball and a tennis ball and a basketball, and you're just trying to compare the differences between a heavy and a light ball. Something that I need to point out, like right now, especially with this heavy and light thing, is most of the time you don't want to do this. As you can see, all the balls are just falling at the same together, but they're all kind of doing their own thing. But when you do the heavy versus light ball, just remember that what you want to do is to have two balls that are the same size, and then when they both fall down, they should both hit the ground at the same time. And then once they've hit the ground, now from there is now where things are going to change. This one's going to bounce slightly higher. This one's just going to continue and roll away. That's kind of what you're doing in the comparison of heavy versus light. It's that they're both falling at the same speed, and then what happens afterwards changes. So if you do many of them, it's also now gets tricky when you have like 3 of them. All 3 of them need to fall at the same time. They're going to bounce. Since one will reach the apex before the other, they can't now both fall at the same time when they're coming down. Like there's a whole sort of complicated stuff going on when you're supposed to be comparing the heavy and light ball. So when you do that, just remember they start in the same place, hit the ground at the same time, and then from there they're supposed to do different things. Yeah. So yeah, that kind of sucks. And then the other one, which is what we're going to do today, is bouncing across the screen. So from left to right of the screen, the ball's going to bounce. This is a nice one. It helps now to show how energy dissipates as the ball is bouncing. We're now the the height of the bounces are dissipating, so we're now trying to make that dissipation look more realistic, while at the same time still doing the same bounces that are doing easing as they get to the top and speeding up as they come down. And the same thing, when they each come down, they all speed up at different rates, so they can't be at the same speed as they are coming back down. Kind of have to do all those comparisons. So there's a lot going on in the bouncing ball, but essentially it's about the ball coming down, hitting a surface, and how it reacts to hitting that surface, and gravity. So here's a really cool a ball machine, something that's really fun to do. Not by me though, but if you're feeling really adventurous and you'd like to try out learning physics and just get better at this sort of thing, these ball machine sort of things are the best practice you can do right after the bouncing ball, of course. Once you're tired of bouncing a ball, you can start applying physics to other stuff like overlap over here and the reaction of the horn to the ball hitting. All these nice little details. So let's go straight into what needs to happen first, which is planning and reference. Hope you guys are still there. Hope you can still hear me. I'll assume so. Let me just double check. Yeah. Okay, so planning and reference is the first thing we need to do, which is to just generally decide what it is we want to do. So do we want to do a heavy ball, a light ball? Is what a GIF loop? Yeah, so we need to decide if the bouncing ball, what it's going to be, a basketball, a bowling ball, how many bounces it's going to have, the size, the distance from the camera. We're just basically deciding what the shot we're going to do is. So at this point, you're kind of just freelancing it. You can go on YouTube and check out different stuff. There's like, let's see. If you go to Vimeo and just search for bouncing ball reference, there's a lot of animators who've done this exercise, so they just post their reference. There's also this one on YouTube. Just search for video reference of bouncing ball and you'll find a lot of guys have done it. But the best thing you want to do is to just record yourself. Get your phone, put it on a box or something and make it balance and find a ball somewhere and just drop it and let it bounce and record that and then try and animate that. Because if you can animate the real thing, if you can imitate the real thing and animate the real thing, then what you learn out of it will make it a bit easier for you to make your animations look realistic. So the advanced experimental bouncing ball experiment. I would not say it needs to loop. I'd say you can make like the ball goes off the screen and then another one comes out from like the top to continue the loop. Or you can just make it something that runs once. It doesn't have to be that good. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Just try and keep your work simple, because you're also trying to learn from it. You're not necessarily trying to do this so that you can post it or do anything fancy. Yeah. So what we're also looking at when we're looking at reference is the animation style we plan to do. Oops, I need to do this. The animation style we plan to use. We're also looking at when we pick footage, we're also looking at how many times the ball has bounced, the distance it's covered, the number of times it's bounced, whether the ball is rotating, how many times it's rotated, how many times it rotates between bounces, and how strong squash and stretch is going to be. I'd like to point out early that if you intend to use squash and stretch, you need to decide now before you start getting into that multitasking has refused. So I should just trace a video. Yeah, you probably can't trace a video. You probably learned something out of it. We're probably going to do that, but a fancier version of that. Yeah, you need to decide if you're going to do squash and stretch early. Trace it till you make it. That's a t-shirt right there. So squash and stretch intensity is something you need to decide early. Squash and stretch affects how you're going to create keyframes. We'll see why in a second. Maybe in like 10 minutes. We'll see why. So let's go to a big heads up before we continue. Don't use someone else's planning. That's not the point exactly. The point of the planning is so that you can look at the video, see what's going on, figure out exactly what you want to do and write it down in your own thoughts and your own method. And that's probably what someone else did. So it becomes very hard for you to be able to use someone else's planning as effectively as that person probably did. So just do it yourself. It's like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. It's time well spent. So don't use animation as reference in general at all, ever. Don't use okay, you can use it as reference, like I want something like this. But if you're doing like what we were saying, where you're gonna trace something and just and you want to do a bouncing ball, don't use another person's bouncing ball as a reference. You're defeating the purpose of the exercise, which is to practice physics and how it works. So majority of the bouncing ball animations available online are wrong in some way. Controversial, I know, but yeah, they're just done by common people and real guys who are also still trying to learn. So a lot of the time the stuff you find is not necessarily a professional did it or someone actually finished it and made it perfect. So don't really rely on the stuff you'll see online. So how will you know if your animation is right or wrong? Talk to people. Come to this hangouts. Show your stuff. Post it in the group. Selfish plug. Etc. Etc. Just get some reference and get some people to look at your work, but don't rely on 100%. Don't rely 100% on what's online. All right. So as we're looking at a ball bounce, we're also looking at what we call the parabola sequence. If I was gonna make a crazy movie and give it a sci-fi title, that's probably what it would be. A parabola sequence, the idea of a parabola is this shape like this. And the idea behind the parabola is that a bouncing ball is basically just a bunch of parabolas. But not just any parabola, it's like the same one being repeated a few times. So if you really look at it, it looks like it's this shape here, and it looks like it's moving downwards, right? So it's not really scaling down or doing anything. It's just the same shape, but it's being pulled down. So that it's just a sequence of parabolas, and where the parabola meets the ground is just where it intersects with the next one. So you put another one where it meets the ground. We take this same parabola and just move it slightly down, and then that's where you'll find the next one. And then where it hits the ground like that, where it hits the ground like that. Yeah, so it's just a series of parabolas, but the important thing is that it's being cut off like this. It's not being scaled down or scaled inward so much. It's like as we're going along, we're just chopping the parabola and making it smaller and smaller as we go, as it gets closer to the ground. Remember that, guys. That's important. It's in the exam. So we can say we can say a parabola is basically gravity times momentum, and that means that gravity is as the ball goes up, it slows down, and then as it comes down, it speeds up as it goes down. So it decelerates as it goes up, it accelerates as it goes down, or vice versa. And then there's momentum, which is just the loss of energy on impact, how that energy being contributed by gravity and by whoever threw the ball down. What's happening when it hits the ground is now where momentum comes in. The loss of energy on impact is basically, is it bouncing or not? A bowling ball would not bounce. It would just, hit the ground and instantly lose all its energy. So that makes it, that's just what is it? That's what contributes to its momentum. You also have a beach ball. Maybe it'll just float a little bit because of buoyancy or air resistance or something. Once it hits the ground, since it's not so much weight, it won't bounce so high. A tennis ball is rubbery, so once it hits the ground, it'll bounce higher. But as we said before, gravity is a constant thing. So if we took all these balls, put them in the air, put them all in one line, and then just dropped them at the same time, they'd all just come down. And gravity is one thing. It's 9.81 meters per second. So if all these balls were together like this and they all fell at the same time, they'd all hit the ground at the same time. But once they bounce, that's where now things start to change. That's where the difference happens. So hope that made sense. If you have any questions, holla. Hey, what's up, Yogi? Welcome. We have Tracy to make it. Do you use PRF? It is an app that basically is an infinite canvas for putting a reference images on canvas. What do I use for reference? I just dump them in Blender actually, or I just have images open. I try to keep my apps to a minimum, so I don't install a lot. The fact that it embeds images into one file is great. Normal folders, hundreds of images. Yeah, and I get that thing of you can have it like floating in front of this, on top of everything. I've seen that as a nice feature. I mean, if it works for you, it works for you. The light is dead, so I guess that's a bust, which sucks. Okay, let's go on and analyze some footage. That animation was jarring, but let's just look at some footage, and I'll show you guys some really cool stuff you can do inside Blender to let you well, analyze said footage. Let's go to here. So what I have is a basketball, and you can basically do this with any app. I'm about to spoil for myself by showing this other app. I have this other one called Keyframe Pro, which is a review app, kind of like Sync Sketch without the sync. So this is the footage I'm using. It's this dude throwing a basketball on the ground. And yeah, so this is the reference, and now there's some things we need to take into account. You could do this in Keyframe Pro, or you could do it in Blender. I also made another version which is stabilized. I'm not sure how well stabilized though. It's a bit, yeah, it's because I don't have the camera moving. I thought I should stabilize it, so I just did this in After Effects. Just removed the camera shake. I think that video should work better, so I'll use that in Blender. So inside Blender, I'll create a new layout. Ooh, someone said the UI tends to be too small, and then I said that's too big. Yeah, that should do. So we'll go to a new layout. We'll go to video editing and just create a new video editing layout. And then we can grab that stabilized footage and drop it there. Just give it a sec to do that. Cool. So it's gonna create a proxy. Just let that finish. All right, that's done. And now the footage is inside Blender, not playing in real time, which kind of sucks. That's not ideal. Should really play in real time. Blender, why you do this? Anyway, probably because of all the stuff I have open, but we can use Keyframe Pro instead. But the idea you could do here is, ooh, you know what? I need to do it here because of the information I'll get. So anyway, use the app. Really use the app you like. I'm just gonna continue with Blender despite it not being real time, and we'll take a look at what we need to look at. So I mentioned we need to look at the height of the ball, so I'll grab the annotation tool here and just draw a circle where the ball is. And we kind of want to figure out how high it's falling. So that's, let's say that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's say 6. Maybe, let's go with 6 for now. So it's 6 balls high. And then we'll let the footage play out. Hopefully it's still in the same place when it starts. We can even take note of what frame it's at when this happens. So this is frame 17. So right here, 17. And we'll keep going till it hits the ground. Boop. There. It actually hits the ground between frames, which kind of sucks. So we can't actually see it touching the ground. So we'll just assume that it's there. This is the egg frame where it hits the ground, which is frame 34. And then the top, exactly where it's, you can see it kind of slows down at the top till there. That's 45. And that's pretty much what you're going to do for the whole video. And you'll count the number of bounces, count what frame things happen. And at the same time as you're doing this, you're also glancing at what the actual ball is doing. You're looking at the way it's speeding up as it's going down. This is frame 17. By frame 26, the ball is still up here. But then it takes like just another 10 frames before it actually hits the ground. So you can see there's a difference in speed, which is what the spacing actually is. And that's what we need to be looking for. Let's see. Annotations. View. Do they onion skin? They do. Beautiful. Oh, I'm so glad they do. So we can actually see them together. And now I can like draw. I can go to like frame 34. And we'll see the ball was here before. And if we do like a trace of the bottom, so the bottom of the ball is here. And goes there. I'm not sure you guys can see the onion skinning. Hey, Morris, what's up? Welcome. So we're looking at how, as you can see, the ball here, there's so many frames close together here. But as time goes by, they start to spread out. By down here, there's so little space between one frame and the next. I mean, there's such a big space between one frame and the next, and we need to make sure our animation also has that. So the one sure way to do that is to know when this happens, know when that happens, and then make sure the height is the same so that the timing makes sense. Because I mean, if the timing was the same and the ground was halfway, it would look like it's floating. So we need to make sure we're getting the height the same way. And yeah, you do the same thing for all of them. You count the number of bounces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-ish bounces. So you keep that in mind. We're not actually going to do all those 16 bounces. But that's what you're doing. And same thing as we're looking at the ball. The way we measured that way, we also need to measure this way. So the one ball was here. So the second ball happened about like a ball and a half away from his legs. So this here is like, let's say 2.5 balls. And over here will be 4. No, it was 6. Yeah, that is hilarious. So that's what you're basically going to do running through all this footage. You can do the same thing in like a software like Keyframe Pro. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're just taking note of exactly what's happening and when it's happening, so that when it comes to your animation, everything matches up. Another reason I like to do it in Blender is because once it's in Blender, it's in Blender. I don't have to now export the drawings again from another software or something. I can just continue from here. So if I go like, actually I'll show you that stuff later. Cool, so let us proceed. Once we've analyzed our footage, we should be able to have something like this, which is the planning I did for the same animation but on paper. You're also looking at the rotations here, how many times it's turned, where it is at what frame, how many bounces, how many frames in between each bounces. Like, you just want to get as much detail as possible. And if you can do that, your animation is pretty much done. Like, if someone looked at this and I told them animate the ball, animate this here, you can see the frame numbers, can kind of understand what's going on. They'd also be able to do it themselves. So that's why you want to spend as much time as possible on just planning out your animation. So scene setup. Now that we're ready to go, we are sure of what the bouncing ball is going to do and when it's doing it, we need to set up our scene. So it's good to have some structure in terms of folders. So what I do, I like to have an anim folder which has the animation alone, a character folder which has the rigs, a reference folder with the footage that we were just looking at, and then a render folder where I'll put the output. It's interesting to have animation separately on its own, because Blender has data blocks. So if you're going to do editorial, or you're going to just have more files down the line, you can have just this file just having the animation alone, because the rigs are in its own file. The animation is on its own. You can also have another folder for props and environments, so that everything is whoa, that's a whole other thing. So we also have the project file you're going to use. I like to increment and save. I've talked about this before, where you just have ball bounce 1, ball bounce 2, and it goes, you just go adding them up as you go through different milestones. As you feel like it's looking good, you just save a new scene, you save a new file. Some interesting stuff I've had before, this last line down here, you can name a file on the hundreds based on what stage it's in. So you can do 101, 102, 103 for blocking. Then when you're done with blocking and you're going to spline and adding more detail or squash and stretch and such, you start going 201, 202, 203. That kind of works. That also doesn't work, because you won't know which blocking file was the last one. You'll have to stop the hundreds. I don't know. Anyway, comes with its own problems. So let's do our scene setup. Let me alt tab to Blender, and I'll just quickly create the scene. So I'll add a floor. I'll go file, link, and get where the ball is. So D, bouncing ball, character, there's the ball rig. Go to collections, character ball, link. And there it is. Rig and all. We need to make an override. So space, override, make library override, so that we have a rig to control. Yep. And then now we just need to organize the stuff in here. So I have my stage set up. I have my character collection already created. Maybe I could move this to its own, and I can rename this to floor. Floor. Yeah, floor. I usually don't wanna mix them up. Get our render settings done. So one thing I usually forget is to set this temporary output to an actual place, because it goes to some random folder and they fill up space. So there we go. Ball bounce, accept. So we know where it's going. We don't a PNG sequence. I like to do MP4 just because it's a simple animation. I'm not doing final render or anything. So for now, I can just leave it as MP4. And that's pretty much it. So we can save this file, save as. Head back to that folder and create that new folder I was saying called anim. And then, do I want to create a new one here? No. We'll call this ball bounce .000.blend. Oh, I don't need to add .blend, but that's just to let me know that this is with nothing. Like, this is the starting point. So once I've secured the starting point, I actually now need to set the working file I'm going to use, because if I start working on it and I press Ctrl S, it's going to save over the 00. So we'll just go save as and change this to a 1. So we can do just plus, or we can do 101. Oops, numlock. Yeah, so there, now we are ready to go. We don't have the camera set up, so let's do that. So for this, we just want a side view. We could try and emulate the same camera view as what we had in the video, but the general idea is just to make sure we're getting the same enough space, because we said it needs to be 6 balls high, right? We just need to make sure the space is right. Oops. What? There. Okay, that should do for now. So I've kind of changed something. So just to save backwards without having to do the save as again, there's a way I can save back to the 00 without having to save twice. So I can just go File, Save Copy, and grab that one, Save As. And now it's just saved the file, but it still kept me on the 101 file that I was working on before. So if I Control S now, it will still save on 101. Okay, so the scene is set up and ready to go. Another thing we can do is split this screen, change this to video sequencer, and then change this to preview. And then now, oops, I should do it this way, since there's a bit more space this way. So we can go video sequencer, preview, and now I have the other ball bounce I did is now here. And the cool thing is now it's synced. So as I move the time here, as I do the animation down here, the reference up here is going to update. So once again, I can just save copy and make sure that's up there, and then save. So project is ready to go. If you are a layout artist, that's your job done, or an intern somewhere. That's your job done. You can clock out and let the animator do the rest. So blocking. What is blocking? This is the fun part, guys. This is the part I've been looking forward to. Blocking is where we... Oh, do you guys have any questions so far? I hope everything has made sense. Everything's made sense so far. Chat lag. I'll never get used to that. Okay, so feel free to post your questions in the comments. I'm just gonna keep going. So blocking. The first thing you want to do is to add in the important storytelling poses, then add in the extremes, then we'll add the in-betweens. And once again, just a reminder, we need to make sure we include squash and stretch from the beginning, because it can get a bit crazy. So keyframes. Keyframes are the most important frames. You can't tell your story without using keyframes. So yeah, it's just, if you just saw the keyframes by themselves, you should be able to tell what's going on. So generally speaking, for bouncing ball, one would say the keyframes are the parts when it touches the ground and the parts when it's in the air. Though I wouldn't strictly say those are the most important points. I think animation-wise, they are, in terms of, there's not much beyond these points that's going to happen. Now, if we take a moment and just look at these keyframes using what I like to call the proprietary method, the proprietary pen tool visualization method, patent pending, please don't steal my idea. The pen tool visualization method is just going to allow us to be able to see how the animation is going to look before we've even reached the software or before we've even pressed play. So once we've set up our keyframes, we can already see by drawing these lines that some of these peaks are not in the middle. Like this one is not quite in the middle. It's a bit to the left. This one's a bit to the right. And we can see that it's just a bunch of straight lines. You can tell this is not a bouncing ball. And just like we've learned before with the hammer and the nail, we can already tell that the computer is going to do something stupid here. If we look at another method, which is the pen tool visualization method with the Bezier, you'll see now this is like if you press F9 in After Effects and it eases the keyframes, it's now just going to make this wobbly thing. So if you kind of visualize like you took the pen tool and then you clicked on these points to draw the shape, you can see what the comp is going to do. And if you use Bezier curves, you can also kind of approximate what eased keyframes are going to do. So already we can tell we're not done. most definitely not going to work. The ball's just going to do pop, 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 pop. I mean, do I really need to show you guys that in Blender? I don't think so. Because, yeah, we're not done yet. We can already tell that we kind of need to tell the computer more about what's happening in between these keyframes. Man. Oh, no. Wait. See what I did there? In between... I was supposed to actually do the keyframes. Okay, let's go to Blender and just do those keyframes. So we'll grab the ball, head on over to pose mode, make sure we're on the first frame, and we'll move it. We'll make sure we're grabbing the mover. So let me just come out of the camera view for a sec. In fact, I can do this. 3D viewport, camera. Let's unlock. So I can do this. And yeah, so we now have the camera on one side, reference on this side, and the ball here. So let me grab mover, which is main. And we've said we need to move it up by 6. So let's do a proper side view. As you can see, it fits in this box proper. So one, wait, we don't have to do it that way. You can just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It needs to get up here. So we can just do that. Kind of approximating. Remember here we were sketching as well. There's some errors. There's still some margin for error. We don't really have to be exactly the same. Ooh, too big. There we go. So let's do keyframe here for location. And then we'll go to where it touched the ground. Wait, left his hand, which is actually frame 17. I guess it wasn't 17. It was more like where his hand starts moving is like there. It's more like 22. So we'll do I, available. Go to where it touches the ground, which was 34. And then just move this way it needs to go. So, okay, I'd probably just do it that way, but just to be sure it's exactly where it needs to be, I'll just reset by Alt-G. I'll just reset its position and then move it forward by, we said, 4. So 1, 2, 3 and a bit, actually. I think 4 is a bit too far. And then you can do I, location. So we've already set the first drop of the ball. Of course, After Effects, not After Effects, the comp is just going to do its own stuff. It's already tweening wrongly. You can see that here the ball is halfway, but here it's already closer to the ground. So we already have some issues we're going to have to fix. And then the same thing happens with the next bounce. It's the ground there, goes up, touchdown apple. So last time we did 3 balls, so this time we probably want to do a bit less. And then I, location. Then I can go right in the middle. It should be exactly in the middle there. And pull this up. So once again, I need to also go in and see how high the second bounce has gone. So it's gotten there. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and a bit. Another thing you could also do is you go into Photoshop, cut out the ball, and then just literally just measure. Use it to measure. If you're feeling that philanthropic, but I don't think that's necessary. Blender also does not have motion parts as such. 2, 3, 4. So it can be a bit tricky. Location. So just as we had predicted before, we'll see that if we go to general layout and try and watch this, you'll see just it's just waving up and down. In fact, I kind of messed up that last key. What's going? Oh, I just took it straight up. Okay, let me fix that real quick. What? I messed it up proper now. Okay. Oh, it doesn't have. This is off. My bad. I need to set auto key on because I'm assuming it's setting keyframes. It does have motion paths, but I'm trying to avoid using them because then I'd just try and draw paths myself. It does have this, but then now I just try and draw the parabolas here directly, which is not a good idea. But anyway, it is a good idea because then I would have seen that I made this mistake. Alright, so I can grab these guys, change them to Bezier. Can already see like there's some stuff going on down here, some weirdness going on, like the comp's already doing some silly things. So that's why I wouldn't want to see this stuff. It's too bad. We can also do constant, but anyway, no need for that. So yeah, you set up the keyframes and all those 19 bounces that 10 bounces that we had seen before in the reference footage. Your plan here is now to do that as well. So yeah, here's the plan I was making. Between the keyframes, you need to add in-betweens or breakdowns, and these are what are going to help the comp and also help the animation come together, in that we're now telling the computer what's happening in between the keyframes. Or in other words, you can say, let me break it down for you. So the in-betweens are in gray. Before we had the yellows, and now by adding the in-betweens, which is these gray dots here, I think even just by looking at this, you can already tell it's starting to make a bit more sense. We can already start to see that there's a curve happening here just by defining these 2 points, and we're also giving the easing that's happening up here as the ball comes back up. And another, I forgot to point out when I was showing the keyframes, but it's cool. And we just keep going. We just continue adding more in-betweens, because the in-betweens are what are going to help us to define the action. And that's what they're made for. By giving that variation between this keyframe and this keyframe, instead of it just going as a straight line in between, by adding some detail in this in-between, by moving it up here, or by making things slow down and speed up, we're now adding more detail into what's actually happening in the scene. We're now starting to show that acceleration, that deceleration, and so on. So this is now where your principles apply. You want to show speeding up, you show bigger spacing. You have to make sure you're showing that it speeds up when it comes down. You need to show that it's slowing down as it comes up here. You need to show that the frame before the bounce, it was up here, then it hit the ground, and then on the next frame it was here. It wasn't above, this one wasn't down here below it or at the same level, because it's losing energy. We need to make sure that the frame before is higher than the one after the bounce. So yeah, that actually means that you'll see we actually end up adding a lot of keyframes, and your timeline ends up looking pretty crazy with just a whole bunch of dots on it. And that's actually what you want. You're now taking control of your animation and making sure that you're getting what you want, as opposed to trying to compete with the comp and convince it to do what you want. So like we've seen here, with the blender, the motion path it was giving me was just absolutely ridiculous. And trying to start to fix this is going to be a complicated process, right? Let's at least try and clean this up, right? Because it's kinda not going the distance it's supposed to. I need to see that parabola. So like this, and then it cuts down. Yeah, so you'll see it starts to do all sorts of funky things. On this path, it's slightly slanted to one side than the other. There's a bit of a curve here going this way instead of the curve going this way. So instead of fighting with the computer and trying to get the motion paths to do what we want them to do, instead we can just apply those in-betweens and apply them as keyframes. So in this point where the ball is supposed to be coming down, as you can see, it's just rushing down towards this next keyframe. We actually want it to start slow, so we'll go a few frames down and then define that place where it needs to be, which is up here, so that it arcs down, right? And then as it comes down to hit the ground, you'll see this frame just before it hits the ground is wrong. I mean, this is a keyframe we set, but this frame just before is putting the ball, it's making the ball go this way instead of going back towards this other keyframe we made up here. So again, instead of struggling with graph and editing the graph editor and trying to get it to look right, we can just literally do it ourselves and just put the ball where it needs to be. And you can already start to see the curve is now starting to work the way we want. Now this acceleration, where the ball starts to speed up and those frames, the gaps between the frames increases, it's now just coming automatically because of how we're putting it where we need it. So this, we can just do this to smooth it out. I'm kind of just eyeballing it here. Ideally, what you want to do is to also look at the footage, do the same thing and measure how far the ball is going on different frames. Here, when I was putting this keyframe, I should really be looking at the footage and really just dialing in exactly how much it is. Like if this thing moved by half or a quarter of the ball size, I should make sure that my keyframes are doing the same thing. But for now, I'm kind of just trying to do this as a demo for the sake of trying to keep this thing from being like 10 hours long. So I hope that's made sense. Now, this also, how this all applies to, let's say, 2D as well, is since we're thinking about putting the ball where we want it and at the right time, it should be there at a certain time. Let me just quickly add this other one. Let me just quickly do this one last one here, just to make sure it makes sense. In the comp, it's done. The ball hits here. On the next frame, it's putting it obviously right there. So we'll just try and get this to be, it can't bounce on the same height as the last one. It needs to be lower. So we'll just put it there. And we can even look at the path and kind of figure out exactly where it needs to be. And that now like just automatically is just going to start working. And you can see here from what we've done by putting this key here, now the comp is now squeezing all that space we took away from here. The comp is now squeezing up the frames up here. Well, I guess motion paths was a good idea. You guys are smart. I guess putting the motion paths has now helped us see that it's slowing down as it goes to the top. But at the same time, we're not just doing it and then, oh, okay, we leave it like this. We're still also looking at the footage and making sure that even as it's slowing down here, the slowdown is happening at the right time and at the right place. And then it goes back down. It's definitely going down too fast. I won't arbitrarily just fix it here. Remember what we were saying, when you're looking at the hammer and you just see that one frame is wrong, it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to fix that frame. Like now I can see this ball is in the wrong place. It doesn't mean I have to fix this frame. It just means I have to do something somewhere else on either the other two keyframes or just to add another keyframe somewhere else. But it doesn't necessarily have to be where I'm seeing the problem. So let's just move back a bit. I know for sure 45 is where it's supposed to be. And I know for sure 54 is where it's supposed to be. Is it? Yeah, it is. So what's going wrong to make this look like this is that I probably need to either do the same thing I did here of adding another keyframe here so that it squeezes stuff up here, or I can come back and add another keyframe here which just adds some hang time on top of where the ball is going to be. So as you can see, I'm actually solving the problem. I'm solving the same problem in two different ways. I could either add a keyframe up here, or I could add a keyframe down here, or both. I could actually just do both. Let me just do both. So the key here is as it hits the ground again, the frame before, make sure it's not the same height as this one. So it should be slightly below this so that we can believe that it's lost some energy. Let's even do it that much. And yeah. So we just continue doing it that way, and as time goes by, the parabola will start to manifest itself. Ideally, you don't want to do it this way. Now I can see the shape is wrong. Ideally, you want to switch off the path and just look at it as if it's just a plain animation and see how the movement looks to you. See, it already looks pretty good to me. Considering we've barely even watched it as I was doing it. We were just looking at these keyframes and dots, and we've done a pretty okay. It's not a decent job. This is pretty bad. This grouping up here is pretty bad. But yeah, I'll get to that. So let's go back to this guy, and that's essentially what we're doing. We're putting in betweens and telling the comp make sure at a certain time the ball is here, and I want it here for this to work. Now squash and stretch. Now this is why I was saying you need to know it early. It works the same way. You want to now start applying the stretch along the path and putting it with these keyframes that are going to be the in-betweens. Because you can see down here, this keyframe that was a circle ball is now the ball when it's squashed. You don't actually get to see the ball in its proper shape. And then when you do that, the frame before the impact should be the ball touching the ground, and then the frame after that should also be the ball touching the ground. And then now those keyframes on either side of that is now where you'll actually put the ball in the air. So yeah, for squash and stretch, the workflow is very different, but not very different. It has a few things you're going to do slightly differently. But the same thing needs to apply. As the ball is, you now apply principles. As the ball is going down, it's speeding up. As it comes back up here, it's easing and slowing down. It's regaining its shape once it's lost all its speed. As it continues to speed up, it continues to distort and stretch. And then the faster it's going, the more it's stretching. So this stretch here should be more than this stretch here, and that should be more than this stretch here, and the same goes on the other side. But also this stretch here and this stretch here should be the same. Like it's it's symmetrical as well. It's some pretty interesting stuff. And so if I was going to do squash and stretch now on this ball, you do the same thing as what we've done so far. Right click to select. You grab the squash and stretch control, make sure it's facing the right direction, and then you scale it to be the value it needs to be. And then now the comp is actually the same way we've just done to fill in this stuff. The comp itself is now going to fill in all that stuff of the ball squashing and stretching properly. I hope you guys are keeping up and all this stuff is making sense, because I know usually when I go into this technical stuff, it gets a bit conk. So just shout out in chat if you're still with me. while I add squash and stretch. So there we go. It's available. So rotation and scale. Blender layout is weird. Yeah, there are no pop-ups. So what I'll do now is I'm going through the squash and stretch parts, all the keyframes, and I'm adding the stretching. Not exactly in the most ideal way, but the idea is just to show you guys what I mean. When I say the comp will fill in the stuff for you. So I know for sure the ball has to be like this at this point. Here, it has to be like this. So, no, not rotation. There, like that. So now you'll see it's boing. It's gonna do not perfect, but a decent amount of boing. Yeah, looks pretty good to me. Decent enough, but yeah, once again, it's the keyframes. We're putting where I put the keyframes of where I want the ball to be. At the same time, I'm also setting what I want the squash and stretch at that time to be. So now it also becomes easier for the comp now to fill in all the stuff as it's creating its own frames. I'm setting the frames and the computer is filling them in. I find Maya weird. I'm going to show some Maya stuff though, so don't worry about that. Yeah, so let's take a look at what we discussed before with the pen tool visualization. Now that we have more in-betweens and we've set those in-betweens where we want them, it becomes a lot clearer. You can just look at the graph and you can look at how the dots are connected, and the path now makes a lot more sense. We now have a clearer path of how the ball is moving. You can now see the parabolas happening, and you can also see the acceleration and deceleration. So all that details are coming from the in-betweens. Looks like a cartoony ball animation. Yeah, it's an extremely cartoony ball animation. When we were taught in AM, actually, we were trained that squash and stretch should be felt and not seen. So when you see it, that's what's making it feel cartoony. But it's all working out from this extreme. Yeah, exactly. It's just way too much. But hey, I got a cartoony animation going, so that's pretty dope. If you also, there was one more thing about this. If you look at the linear curves and you look at the Bezier curves, they're also pretty similar. There's not that much difference between them. So when you put the frames yourself, when the computer is filling them in, whether it does them linear or Bezier, once you fill them in this way, it doesn't really matter. It becomes less important which method of interpolation that the comp is using, because you're setting the frames where you want them. Another thing was, let me show you this. We talked about stretch. But it's okay. In-betweens, yeah. So that's where I was meant to do the in-betweens. But tangents, whichever you pick, be aware and stick to it if you're using auto tangents or you're using variable tangents. By variable, I mean these ones where you can move the anchors versus these ones where the comp sets for you the anchors. I prefer this one mainly because it's easier to retime. These like if you add a keyframe here, it's going to do this. It's going to try and account for these anchors as well. Whereas here, if you just randomly add a keyframe somewhere, it's going to do that. So I find this a little bit more manageable because now in the timeline, I'll see this. Whereas here, I'll just see this. So here I can just tell there's a bump. These two keyframes next to each other are causing this bump. But here you can't really tell that this is happening. So visually it can be a bit tricky to work with. The other thing is also if you squeeze these two keyframes on the side, if you squeeze them together, those two anchors don't move either. So what's going to happen is it's going to become this path ends up becoming wider. It ends up being this. Whereas if in this one, if you squeeze them together, these anchors will automatically adjust. So this becomes this becomes this. Oops, yeah. Which is kind of the same thing, but now the issue with this is now it's overshooting and going this way because of these guys. Whereas this one, the keyframe would have to be here for it to overshoot. It actually can't. It would never overshoot. Anyway, the idea is that whichever type of bezier you choose, just make sure you stick to it. Tangent, I mean. And then the next step is refinement. So we now take a look at correcting our keyframes, improving our in-betweens, organizing data, and cleaning up keyframes. So we take a look at what we've done so far. We take a look at our keyframes and where they are, our in-betweens. Maybe we need a few more frames here to show how it slowly falls down. Let's fix this being wobbly. Let's fix these distances. This parabola seems a bit too wide. Maybe this point should be like somewhere here. So you do that stuff. You find the problems, you fix them. There's our former path. There is now where our new ball is. We've added a few more frames here so that you can really see it slowing down, starting slowly. Slow out, everything symmetrical. We've fixed the spacing, and then now you have essentially a bouncing ball done. Whether it's in Bezier mode or linear mode, it'll all look correct. So, oops. Another cool thing is we can do this. So let me hide this guy and let me do it the same way again. Let's go to what's this thing called? Shift A. I need to go to object mode. Shift A. Blah blah blah. Grease pencil, blank, and then let's see if I remember how to do this. Draw. And we'll go back to layout and we'll just basically do the same thing. The same way we did the bouncing ball, we can also do it in 2D. So let me hide this guy. And you just essentially do the same thing. Draw the first ball there. Go on down. See where it's like halfway down, like there, right? Can add a stretching ball like this. I think OBS is not updating. Hits the ground, so I can use this as reference just to see where it hits the ground. And that's essentially it. If you are doing like a 2D animation, you just do the same thing. You look at where all those keyframes are and essentially draw everything where it should be. And once you're done, it'll just come out like a proper animation. And remember, do the same thing. Position, timing, squash and stretch, put all those keyframes together, and you'll have yourself a nice ball animation. So yeah, generally what we're doing is to try to improve our vision. We want to be able to start seeing that slow in and slow out. We want to be able to see the parabolas. Basically talked about it a few times before. We're going to refine. We're going to add our squash and stretch, try and improve our keyframes, improve our in-betweens. like once you're here, oops, object mode. Once you're here, you want to now start scrubbing through and looking at what kind of in-betweens you can add. Sometimes you just straight up just add in the middle of nowhere. You can just add another key just to help the shape look a bit better. And then let it play out. But yeah, hope that's made sense, guys. If you have any questions, let me know, because all you need to do next is to final the animation, remove bad frames, add extra keyframes where you need them, add some texture detail like the rotation of the ball. As it's bouncing, it needs to spin as well, so that's probably something you do as the final thing. And you can do that. So let's do some rotation on this guy. So we'll switch to texture mode. Oh, I flipped to the other side. Texture mode and add your rotations. So we'll do the same thing. Go back to 0. Oops, go back there. Okay, it's actually, my comp is struggling a bit. Sorry, guys. So here I'll do eye rotation. Oops, nothing selected. Eye rotation. And then go to where it needs to be. Spin that amount. Oops, wrong control. Yeah, that's the one. Aside from an intro to Blender, okay, yeah, sure, I could probably do that, like as a hangout on its own. I've actually had some people ask me about teaching Blender, but wait a second, I have a question, guys. Why didn't we just do this, since we were talking about keyframes? Why don't we just make a bunch of keyframes that are Bezier and then just put the anchors like this? And it's for the same thing I've said before. If you want to do something like this, where you want to make sure the frame before, the frame after, it's at a specific place, it becomes very hard to do that when you have such keyframes, because now it'll start doing this thing of, it'll start doing this thing of the path going like this. You'll start getting weird things happening. So don't do this, guys. Don't do this. Try to avoid it as much as you can. I think do it if you really know what you're doing. Don't rely on them so much. So just to give one last look at exactly why in-betweens and keyframes are so important, let's take a look at a character shot. This is something I'm working on right now. Let's see. Is this the one? Yes. No. Is this the one? Yes. So when we're doing an animation, we talked about like how you first do blocking and then you do keyframes and then in-betweens. So like this is an example of a dialogue shot. Oops. Is that audio? Might be loud though. There we go. Okay, so yeah, it's just a dialogue scene. It's two characters talking. And this is what you do when we're talking about keyframes. You're just adding those important bits. Just those things that help you understand exactly what's going on. It's the guy touching. It's them leaning into each other and the camera changing even. All this stuff is just blocking. It's before you even start adding fancy detail and such things. You're getting the general idea in. before you even start doing lip sync and such things, you want to be able to be sure that he's actually going to be sitting like this. She's actually going to be looking at him this way. You don't have to deal with too many keyframes. So when you do it like this, you're just getting the basis of the idea in. So now as the project advances, and now like here for example, I had to change the camera completely. Not completely, but I had to change the camera. I put a new cut, and now he's doing more stuff as opposed to where he was just standing there. Before he was just there talking, but now we can add more detail of him lifting up his hands in between the action. The audio is probably over me. Let me mute it. Let me show you this version. So you can see now there's more keyframes, there's more moving, there's more stuff happening in between. Once again, like I said before, it's the in-betweens doing the work. Let me just do a side-by-side of these two. And you can kind of see like it's the same, right? Maybe his head here is tilted a bit. Here it's straight, but it's the same thing. The keys are the same. But now in this one on the left, you can see they both come to this position of pointing at her, right? But before they get there, oops, like for this guy, there's like one little in between happening just before he gets even to the next pose. And that in between is just now helping to serve to show that he's relaxing a little bit, and it's tying into the dialogue of him. He's pointing, and then now he's starting to turn back. So now that in between is just to show it's not a continuous movement. There's a point in between that you can add just to show detail. Same thing here, especially here with the arm. We've decided that the arm is going to be here. As you can see, there was a change here. The arm was lower, and now we've raised it a little bit. Even the eyes are kind of looking a bit better. But yeah, he goes from this pose here to this one, and then this one arm raised. So on this other side, you can see that there's some in-betweens. Now, there's an in-between here from this pose to this pose. You see his arm kind of does this, and that's just to help show the path his arm is going to take. Sure, his arm is here now. Oops, which side am I? Sure, his arm is here now, and it's going to end up here. But you kind of want to show his elbow is going to start the action, right? He's going to do this. So to do that, we just add an in-between, which has his elbow already doing the motion, but his arm is still down here. And mixing between those two is now what's going to create that movement like that. And that's essentially what this in between here is doing. Like just this one frame. Because otherwise his arm would just go straight there. But now, thanks to that, we get to see some more detail of what it's doing. You can also add other stuff like overshoots. You see here he goes up, and then now there's another keyframe bringing him back down. So this is an in-between actually. Here's another in-between. Instead of his arm just going straight back down, we get some time to see it coming back down. And these are just the keyframes, by the way. Like the comp is not doing anything here. So yeah, bouncing ball, all that stuff about timing, spacing, momentum, and all these things, they're all building up so that you can now be able to do stuff like this, where you're now filling in gaps, you're adding life to your characters, and not so much fighting with the computer as you are just getting what you want out of it. So yeah, thanks for checking this out. I think that's pretty much it. When I start talking like that, I know it's a wrap. One last thing before... Oh no, I closed the show. Okay, yeah, so you guys go ahead and try and do your own bouncing ball animations. The challenge is now to you. Opening up the Ideas to Creations group. Anyone, if you post your work there, if you post any bouncing ball, I'll definitely jump in and give you feedback and critique on what you're doing, on how far it's come. And how you can improve. But just remember this stuff that I've been showing you, that it's you controlling it. It's you putting those in-betweens and those keyframes that help the computer know. And you're not so much relying on the curve editor and tangents and such things. So yeah. Feel free to post your stuff. It can be Blender, it can be Maya, it can be 2D, it can be stop motion. Grab a coin and your phone and the stop motion app and try and make a bouncing ball with it. Use the same idea, 6 balls up, 4 balls to the side. So with a coin, you just put the coin up, grab your camera, and make the stuff. Take all the keyframes, then take all the in-betweens with your camera. And then now, when you can see it properly, you can now start shoot the whole sequence in one go. Now, let's see what questions you guys have. You guys have been busy in that chat, which is really cool. So let's see, what am I doing? Oops. Looks cartoony. I love C4D too, but Blender has come through a lot for free. Really reluctant to switch. I probably shouldn't read that out loud. Blender for the win! Man, C4D has changed so much. I actually lost track of all the cool new features and things they've added. But I really enjoyed it. It was really cool. $3 for 6 months. Introduction to Blender. Okay, so I do have an intro to Blender, intro to animation sort of thing on the queue. The only issue is it's really complicated to introduce people. A lot of different people are coming from different skill levels, so and they also have different expectations. So that's, I don't know, I'm thinking of doing that more like a workshop, an actual proper workshop people sign up for, as opposed to like a stream like this. I still have a few streams on queue. We've done the ball bounce. We still have to do principles of animation, which still ties into this. We need to do 12 principles of animation and a couple other things that you'll see as we go along. But yeah, I'll find a way to make Blender work. Blender classes of some kind in the group, especially. Like to get guys a bit more active, especially the beginners, because it can be a bit intimidating as a beginner to post in a group with other artists posting cool stuff. Slow in and slow out. Yep. Ease in, ease out, slow in, slow out, cushion in, cushion out. Easy ease. Cool. So Sawa, thanks so much. What about rock art? Yes, if you make a bouncing ball animation with rocks, I will critique it. Don't quote me though. He's gonna quote me. I know this guy. Alright, so anyway, thanks so much for coming through, guys. That's the basis of the bouncing ball. The idea is that I want you guys or anyone who watches this video to be able to watch it and then come through to the groups or to anywhere else and be able to post their work confidently and know at least what they've started is coming from something decent. And it's also easier to give someone feedback if they've kind of covered this, if they understand the stuff we've covered today. So yeah, post your stuff in the group. Let me check it out. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Thanks for coming through once again. If you're watching this after the fact, thanks for watching all the way through to the end. And I hope you've learned something new. Please leave your comments in the group as well. And let me know if this stuff is useful and helping. And one last thing. There was one last thing I was supposed to ask for. I'll remember. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks, guys. Next Hangout. Yes, we'll continue with the live demos. I'm going to do another demo next week. It's gonna be a bit chilled out, no presentation per se. I need a break, guys. I just want to take a break next week and chill out, so we can do either a Q&A or I'll just do a demo with After Effects. I haven't done some After Effects stuff in a while, and I know you guys, some of you are motion designers, so we can just do a loose After Effects demo next week. If you guys have any questions, it's basically an open one. If you guys have any questions or you have something you want me to cover, feel free to leave a comment, leave a question, and come through next week. Ask away. Preferably ask in the group beforehand, so that if it's something I need to pull up some links and such things, I can do that easily. But yeah. Until then, I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for coming to see my ball action. I'm gonna get demonetized, aren't I? But it's fine. Ooh, an hour and a half on the dot. Getting pretty decent at timing this now. Awesome. Please give it a try and send it to me so I can have a look and give you my harsh critique. And hopefully you won't give up. But just remember, guys, set the keyframes. Don't let the computer do everything. The computer will do the worst thing possible. Cool. All right. That's it for today. I'll catch you guys soon. Keep an eye out in the group. Once again, feel free to ask questions. Do you guys prefer WhatsApp? No, I like Telegram because it backs up a lot of backs up all the chat. Where computer doesn't do everything. Does it? It doesn't. Telegram's not bad. Last week we said computer does everything. No, computer shouldn't do everything. If computer does everything, it'll do it wrong. You need to instruct it properly. Then it can do everything properly. Paradox. Contradiction. Need to look into that. Anyway, cool. Thanks, guys, for coming through. I will see you at the open Q&A next week. I'm gonna have the Hangout link up as usual, and then we can cover whatever you guys want to talk about. Maya, Blender, life, how to make lasagna. It'll be open. So see you guys then. Bye.